Apparently we're now live. Good. Sorted. Right, over to me. It's all with me now, boys. Right, so okay. Right. First things first. Bill, have you got any news for us this week?
Yeah, I have actually. There was an article about the oldest piece of rock art ever found, and this
Oh my God, not this one. Yeah, we done that.
was in Indonesia, the island of Sulawesi, 60,000 years old rock art. You've heard of you?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we did this last night, and then somebody come up with an Australian piece of art, and then we had some Neanderthal stuff, and I've got to work it out. So it got really confusing last night. So I think what we'll do, I will have to come back to that next week. It's a bit confusing because
Right.
the stuff that there was also the one about pig. Which one did you get, Bill?
Sorry, say it again, Carl. I missed that.
Did you get that one about the discovery of the handprint or the one about the pig?
Handprint.
Right. Well, Goff sent me the one about the pig.
Okay.
So, and we got another one. So we'll do that one next week. I'm still trying to work all this out. Thank you, guys. So, anything else from you, Bill?
Okay. Nothing. Thank you.
No. Okay. And am I losing the plot? We did Margam last week, didn't we?
No.
Or was it the week before?
Week before.
All right, that's all right then. Anything from you, Goff?
No.
And what about you, Dick? Oi, Dick! Dick!
He's gone to sleep.
Dick, I want to see you, Dick! Dick, I want to see you, Dick. Dick?
He's muted.
Yeah, I'm glad. I didn't want to see Dick anyway. I can see you, Dick, but we can't hear you, Dick. Okay, right, okay. So what? Right, we'll definitely finish at 9 o'clock tonight because I got to get back for the animals, right?
Okay.
What? Yeah, I've got all these creams. I got that. I got that. And I got that, right? And they felt sympathy for me, so they gave me some of those. So there you go. That's all good. So we'll get started now without any further ado. And where are we? Well, Henry should be back next month sometime. So right, where are we? Share. Bill, oh, hang on a minute. What I'm going to do, you know what's going to happen, right? If I don't make Dick a co-host, somebody's going to come on, right? And we're gonna lose the plot, right? So Dick can allow anybody on. I gotta be honest with you, right? I've just seen. Oh God, it was terrible. I've just seen a dog eat something very disgusting in the lane. Right. So there we go. By the way, guys, that's my back.
Nasty.
Apparently, it's to do with a sheep.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with sheep.
I've caught something off the sheep. Apparently,
It can kill you.
Look at the scrape marks on the back of my back because of the sheep.
You want to cut their claws.
Terrible. Yeah, they are. They're vicious little buggers. Honestly, you know, I'm just trying to do my bit for humanity, folks. Right, so what are we doing tonight? That's the big question. What are we doing tonight? Where are we going? What's going on? What we're going to do, we're going to look at the stuff. Back, by the way, we're not looking at my back. We're going to look at the stuff between Julius Caesar and Claudius. And this is a nice little one. And the reason why it's a nice little one is you're going to learn stuff tonight that you've never learned before ever, right? And by the way, the stuff about the cave art, right? There's one article saying that this is the oldest cave art ever. And then at the same time, somebody else is saying this is the oldest cave art ever. So I've got to work it out for next week. Because Goff sent me one thing, Bill's talking about the other one, and then suddenly somebody else found something else. It always happens that way. So I want us to crack on with this now. So this is where we are. And it's called Britain After Caesar, right? But if you look at this on YouTube, it'll say Roman dross. Same difference, same trousers. So the big question is the question we want to ask today, right? One of the most important questions ever, right? We need evidence for the period between Julius Caesar and AD 43. Now, when we went to school, which was a long time ago for Richard, when we went to school, we were told that Julius Caesar attempted his invasions, and then nothing happened. And then suddenly in the summer of AD 43, the Romans decided to give it another go. And Claudius, there it is, job done, Bob the uncle, and that's it. That's over. But that's not the true story. It really not. And why are we looking at a container, a Roman container? And this is something that's been found in Britain, in Canterbury, right? This is dated from between the period 54 BC and AD 43. Now, this gives us a clue, the archaeological evidence. Now, we've got one writer telling us that there's really interesting things going on between the Romans and the Britons between 54 BC and AD 43. And those are the two dates that I continually talk about today, because if I don't, it's going to get confusing. And the reason why it's going to get confusing is this is new evidence. So go ahead with it. This is an awkward, fascinating gap of history. Now, many things we were told in school. People didn't live in Wales between the late 400s and 1066. And then suddenly the Normans turned up, and that's history, right? It's one of those moments. It's very likely somewhere, and listen, this is really interesting. It's very likely that there's a map of the Roman Empire that included Britain before AD 43. I kid you not. I kid you not. So that is something that changes history straight away. So
Carl,
how big and important was the invasion? What?
Carl, can I interrupt and say something?
Yeah, go on.
Say yes. The map you refer to is on a wall about 300 meters from the Colosseum in Rome. It's a large sculpted map showing the empire as it was then. It doesn't show Britain. So
Okay.
that's in stone.
Right, that's very interesting, right? That is really, really interesting. When is that map dated from?
I can't remember. It doesn't show Britannia, so it must be before 43 CE. Must have been.
But when is the date? Is that before 54 BC? And this is the thing, you see, Bill. This is the thing, right? Strabo, right? Bill, Strabo writing in 20 BC. Start again. Strabo writing in AD 20 believes and tells us that the Romans felt Britain was part of the Roman world before the period of AD 43. And that's written down, Bill. So, Bill, you're very correct to challenge me. But there's something very interesting about this period. So we look at a clean, evidence-driven framework that we see some archaeology and classical sources that the Romans were really seeing Britain as part of their world. It's not a legend, between 54 BC and AD 43. Now, what we're saying here is that Rome didn't leave Britain after 54 BC. It may have left it militarily, but in the minds of Roman people, Britain had not left them. Britain is no longer isolated as there between 54 BC and AD 43. It's part of something very special. It's part of the Roman world. So Caesar sails away, we're told, in 54 BC. No legions stay, but Britain is now plugged into the Roman world. So one thing we've got to say is that between 54 BC and AD 43, Britain is not a period within a dark age that we know nothing about. It is a period of Romanization without occupation. It is a period of ideas coming over to Britain. But the archaeological evidence is explosive. So what we've got oil, we've got olive oil jars, we've got rotten fish paste jars, right? We've got jars like this that are dated not before 54 BC and not after AD 43. We're starting to find hundreds of these objects across Britain in the archaeological record. This is one from Canterbury. It's intact. It was used for trade, but it didn't come over in AD 43. It came from before. The one thing about coins is rather interesting. These coins are being found in Britain, but they're not British. These are very similar to the designs of coins that we produce in Britain, but these are actually from Gaul. The point is that now suddenly we're getting coins from Gaul, not just Roman coins, but Gallic coins being spread across Britain, and our coins are in turn going over to. So that means that suddenly after 54 BC, whatever coins you're using, there's a monetary system occurring. People are now trading in money, right? In both sides of the sea. Before 54 BC, they weren't. Now they are. And there's an explosion in making coins, as we saw with the coin lecture that we did some time ago. What we see is lots of Roman wine amphora, thousands of them now being within the archaeological record between 54 BC and AD 43. This amphora, these types of amphora, the designs come from Italy, France, Gaul, Hispania, Spain. This is no coincidence. Again, I've told you this one, something very special happened after 54 BC. We might not find military evidence, but archaeological evidence, we're finding a great deal of this material. Now I'm going to step outside the amphora. I'm going to step outside the jar a moment, and I'm going to step outside the jar and tell you something else. Even though we don't have military occupation in Ireland at all, associated with the Romans, or so we're told, there's no evidence, right? In the southeast of Ireland, we find lots of burials from the 780s, 90s, 100s, 120s, right, in Ireland. And those burials are full of Roman artifacts, but the Romans never got to Ireland. We're leaving that there. We're not going to say any more about that. That'll come up later on with Agricola, right? But earlier on, this is the same thing that's happening in mainland Britain between 54 BC and AD 43. Now, this is a really interesting object. This is actually, we find lots of these in Colchester, right? This is actually another type of amphora. This is like a wine amphora. It's a nice sitting table wine amphora. You might find similar objects like this in the medieval period, but this is a wine. This is something you chuck on the table. It's a big, chunky, but it's the wine amphora, right? It's a flat-bottomed amphora. We're finding these in Colchester. We're finding lots of tablewares. We're finding lots of glass objects, lots of metal goods. Glass. Now, the one thing about glass, from what I know, from what I've seen in archaeology for a very, very long time. Interestingly enough, I've been doing archaeology for over 40 years. Wow, I have. And the one thing about this is that you find bits of glass, for example, as far north as Orkney and Shetland. Glass itself is something very special that we're starting to find it in the archaeological record. That dates from immediately that period between 54 BC and the birth of Jesus. And we find this type of material. Suddenly, what is this doing in Britain? People want this stuff, right? This stuff is not getting over to Britain for no reason at all. It's not captured objects. These are being traded with what people in Britain are trading. Like they're trading grain, like they're trading ore, like they're trading bear skins, various animal skins with the continent. You know, we're trading all these things, and what's coming in return is these objects. So the one thing that I know this is mentioned, is found in Cologne. You know, it's an intact object from AD 300. But the point is, we're starting to find these things, right? One thing that we've got to do forensically as archaeologists is try to ask questions. Me and Bill are going to ask this question. Why me and Bill have been to Orkney together 3 times, right? But for 3 weeks. My God, all together. I've spent 3 weeks with Bill in Orkney, flipping heck. The point is that when me and Bill see bits of glass in Orkney, right? We see bits of Roman material in Orkney. The usual thing that we're told is that they got there by accident, right? Or we've got Roman Samian ware from Gaul. We're finding this stuff, right? Why is it there? And the usual story is that odd trade objects, right? So then you've got to ask, but there's thousands of these objects across Orkney and Shetland. They're not there by accident, right? And the real story is that you're getting bits of glass like this in Orkney and Shetland. This is as far north as you can get, 600 miles away from Kent, right? It's as far north as you can get, actually a little bit more than that. It's as far north as you can get, and you're thinking, well, is there something more going on? Is there actually proper trade, right? And the answer is yes. When you're finding these objects, it's not by accident. You're finding these objects across Britain between 54 BC and AD 43, right? Because there's proper goods going back and forth. And when you look at the Orkney Shetland example, we're told that for the whole period that we've got Roman interaction with mainland Britain, then there's no occupation in Orkney or Shetland, right? But there's a massive amount of trade. What does that mean? Exactly what we're saying now, right? You don't need to have a military presence in an area to have it as part of your world. The British Empire did it in Africa. After the scramble for Africa in 1878, we've got this map of the world, not just Africa, the map of the world. A quarter of the world is actually covered red, right? But you can't argue with me that we had military presences in all of those areas across the world. We didn't, but we still traded with those areas. We still exchanged goods, and this is exactly what's going on with the Roman world. It really, really is. We look at places like Switzerland, right? And we're thinking, well, okay, there is bits of stuff in Switzerland, but there's not a lot, right? But that was still on the map of the Roman world. It's a good point there. So we're finding all these goods in, for example, all this material. We're now starting to find lots of it between 54 BC and AD 43 in Kent. Again, Kent was the landing area of Julius Caesar. The Thames Valley, all the way over to the Thames Valley, you know, Thames north and south. various territories there, and East Anglia, Essex, and so on. A big bulge that sticks out into the sea um, in the east of Britain. Now, there's something else going on which is really, really odd as well. Okay, we'll go on to this in a minute, but we'll look at that coin. There's something else really odd going on in Britain. Very odd. Somebody shouted out yesterday, said, what about the oyster shells that the Romans saw were being profitably harvested in Cornwall, right? There's lots of them in the Roman world being circulated, Cornish oysters before AD 43, right? So why isn't there much Roman stuff in Cornwall before AD 43? There's not much Roman stuff in Cornwall after AD 43. But nevertheless, on the map of the Roman world after AD 43, Cornwall is part of that map. But there's not much in the way of Roman archaeology. Tell you what, Bill, it's probably the only part of the country that you and I have been that we didn't see any Roman stuff. But he was still part of the Roman world. So when we start to think about all of these developments, that is a coin of Conobellinus, right? Who was this leader that existed before AD 43, king of the Catavilani tribe, the tribal people north of the River Thames. But look at that coin. It looks Roman. I hope all three of you were part of my presentation about Roman coins. We actually did loads of presentations about Roman coins, right? And in that, I kept, look at these coins. Don't they look Roman? Don't these coins look as if they've been influenced? What are these? Why are these people producing? Why are these people producing coins that are seemingly part of the Roman world? Why are they doing it? Why do they need to produce coins that look Roman, that seem to be Roman? That's the back of the coin. That's the back of the coin. You've got the obverse and you've got the reverse. These two coins look Roman, but they're not. They're produced by native British people before AD 43. So this is telling us a really important thing indeed, a real important thing. Coinage proves political alignments with Rome. And that's the point, Bill. Conobellinus may have said to the Romans, we are part of Rome. And Rome said, you are part of Rome. That didn't a military conquest. And albeit there's parts of the Roman Empire that acted that way. We're part of the Roman world. The Roman army never went there. We're saying this was happening before AD 43. There's so much going on here. There's so much of a picture, right? There's so much of a story. We can have Rome with the absence of Rome because Rome has already started putting the setting in, playing the ball game for the eventual game that might pan out, the military conquest. But Augustus didn't really need a military conquest of Britain to have it part of his world. Tiberius certainly didn't have it part of his world. What was going on with Caligula? Okay, guys, I'm a bit nuts, as you know, but Caligula, I believe, did come over to Britain, right? But he's been derided and discontinued with the discourse of history and written out as being a total nut job. It was only Caligula did more to attempt, and maybe he did, to invade Britain than Julius Caesar, Augustus, Tiberius, and Claudius. There's more evidence associated with Caligula's invasion of Britain than all those four other figures. Believe me, kid you not. And again, look at the back of that. These are both native British coins produced by totally different tribes. And the one thing about these coins is that they're now part of a new economy, an economy that is growing and breathing and developing. So thinking about all of this, moving on with this and sort of thinking, well, British households adopting Roman lifestyles decades before AD 43. But one of the things that you'll be very aware of is what I'll be saying in a few months' time. British people built Roman villas after AD 43 because they wanted to be Roman. But they were already doing it before. Fishbourne's a good piece of archaeological evidence. And when the likes of me and Bill, we go to Colchester, and we hear written, we see written on the boards around Colchester, loads of them. The Romans came, they saw, they conquered after AD 43 in Colchester, Camel and Junum. But what we do know is that it's very likely the Camel and Junum was a Roman town before the Romans brought their military over here in AD 43. There was just a little bit of a change, that's all. And I even suggested last night, and I've got every right to do this, I even suggested last night that maybe the Temple of Claudius may have been partly built before AD 43. Maybe the people of Colchester were wanting so badly for the Romans to bring a military presence over. Fiction or fact? There's no evidence to prove that I'm wrong. There's no evidence to prove I'm right. But we've got a massive Roman structure burnt down by Boudicca in AD 60. 17 years later, 17 years after it had been constructed, or maybe it had been constructed a few months before the actual Roman invasion of AD 43. Can I just explain my logic there? And my logic is as follows. Let's just go back with something silly. An amphora. The Romans and the Britons thought in two different ways. The Britons thought that when they possessed something that belonged to somebody else, they were possessing the soul of that person. They could control the ideology. Hence why a native Briton, when they're is buried with an amphora. They are now controlling the narrative in death as much as they controlled the narrative in life by possessing said object. The same goes with coinage. You're reproducing what Rome is got on offer. The Romans, on the other hand, the Romans thought in another way. Throw the coin on the opposite side. The Romans thought that by trading, by selling an object, you're gaining control over that person's mind. But the Britons thought the reverse. By obtaining that object, they then controlled the person that sold it to you. Those are the two narratives. But in many ways, Bill, they both work. So this understanding that this understanding that the Britons had, and we'll talk about this now in a moment. The understanding that the Britons had was that they were probably part of the Roman world without the Roman military presence. And the Romans thought that Britain was part of the Roman world without a Roman military presence because they were selling goods to the people here anyway. Does this sound crazy? I'm not asking a question. The Americans did exactly the same with the Vietnamese, the South Vietnamese. By introducing Coca-Cola machines, by leaving Coca-Cola machines behind with bottles of Coca-Cola in them in the American embassy after it had been captured by the North Vietnamese. They felt that they could continue influencing the North Vietnamese by leaving their objects of Americanization around. And guess what? The North Vietnamese bought it hook, line, and sinker. Instead of destroying the Coca-Cola machines, they kept them and they used them. And then they started requesting from Coca-Cola to have a Coca-Cola factory in Vietnam. The Americans had won, but so had the Vietnamese, because now the Vietnamese controlled having Coca-Cola themselves. That's fact. We're seeing this with the Roman narrative in before AD 43. Now, this is a very, very interesting item, and there's a tiny weird noise on this today, and I don't know what it. We've got a very interesting thing here today, and it's a find that was made just a few years ago, and it's basically if you go on to it, it's the headlines are "Dead Fancy Posh Grave of Iron Age Warrior Buried 2,000 Years Ago." It's on the Sun newspaper website, and this came out in January 2020. We'd missed it back then because of the pandemic and whatever, and we're doing something else in the classes. But we do find fancy graves in the late Iron Age, just before AD 43 in Britain. Lots of these types of graves. And the headlines say, battle-hardened individuals who are buried in a Roman fashion, right? In clearly an Iron Age Britain, but has got lots of Roman stuff around them. So what we're finding is now in the archaeology, we're finding objects like this. We're finding really highly ornate swords with bronze work in them. And within the graves, we're finding items which are from the continent. This is an example of a grave near Chichester. And one very, and we go off on a little bit of a tangent in a moment, but one very interesting thing is that these graves are up and coming up to that period of AD 43. Before I talk about what that says at the bottom of the screen there and what that means, can I be critical of one of my archaeological heroes? But I can be critical. Bill and I have been everywhere together. Bill and I have been to Maiden Castle in Dorset. And Maiden Castle was excavated by Sir Mortimer Wheeler. One of the things that used to be said about Maiden Castle is that there's a war cemetery there, over 50 graves. Sir Mortimer Wheeler found ballista bolts in people's spines, damage to people's skulls, and he said that this was to do with a siege that occurred roughly about AD 43, AD 44, after the future Emperor Vespasian, who was then a general, got to Maiden Castle, right? Fortunately, Sir Mortimer Wheeler didn't have radiocarbon dating evidence, which would come on after this statement about 2 decades later. He had interpreted the archaeology in the only way he could have, right? But he was wrong. 2 things about Maiden Castle. Maiden Castle was more or less fully abandoned about 100 years before AD 43. And secondly, is that the burials at Maiden Castle were from a period of around 100 years, not a single battle. So Mortimer Wheeler only interpreted the archaeology wrongly, but if he had radiocarbon dating evidence, he'd have got it right. This object is very interesting. This when it says the grave was mapped out in 3D to preserve it exactly as it was found. Very, very interesting, this. And why this is very, very interesting is because archaeologists don't need to lift anything from a burial anymore. What we do, we scan it all, right? We might take some of the pottery out and whatever. We don't need to move any bones anymore. We can take samples of the bones, right? We can do a 3D image of the burial, right? And we can do a complete replica of the burial in a museum, right? Using a 3D printer, right? we can map the whole thing out. So in other words, we're mapping it out in a computer, and then we can press a button and we can 3D print the burial itself. That is how far technology's actually come. And wouldn't that have been brilliant, Richard, if we could have done that at the 5 Mile Lane instead of putting all 600 skeletons in boxes, never to see the light of day again? Now they can do this. Now they can do this, right? And one of the things that we're actually seeing with burials like this all the way across southeast England and South England as well is that we're finding pots, some Roman pots, some native pots, some made on the wheel like the one on the left, some made not on the wheel like the one on the right there in the middle. We find this all associated with how we see the evolution of this link between Roman, pre-Roman era Britain and then post-Roman era Britain. No, when I say post, not post-Roman era Britain, post AD 43. Somebody's actually mentioned online that trade with Europe was here a long time before the butchers turned up. Well, that's point. The point is with that is that the Romans could have continued trading with Britain, right? Things would have continued, right? For hundreds of years. There didn't need to be a Roman military presence, but something changed after AD 43, which we'll mention today. But Britain was being Romanized by the Romans anyway. And then the question is last night, and I've said the answer is yes. Would Britain have become developed? Would it have seen the day of light? Would it have become a fully civilized country if the Romans hadn't come here? And the answer is yes. All the evidence tells us yes, it would have. So we could have been seen on this map of AD 117 before Hadrian comes over and we conquer most of the rest of 117. We could likely be looking, if the Romans had never military landed here, right, we might be looking at the whole of the British Isles in red, except there was no Roman military presence here. The Romans just claimed the idea, of trade being the predetermining factor of Roman conquest without the Roman military. And somebody's asking that have we got dates for the bodies found at the 5 Mile Lane? The answer is only some of them, because we haven't got all the dates yet, and I don't think we ever will. Moving on to something else, folks. So another 3D model there. Let's go back over to my notes. So this whole really interesting thing is if we go back to Cassivelaunus, we go to Conoballinus, right? We go back to this. So king of the Cassivellani, one of the most powerful tribes in Britain, right? They were starting to use Latin, right? They had Latin on their coins. They stylized themselves as Romans. They started to build sites, pre villas in the Thames Valley area, for example, right? So what we've also looked at Fishbourne, where Bill's been to Fishbourne without me, but I've been to Fishbourne without Bill, right? The Fishbourne itself is a site that we believe was developed into an early type of Roman villa site before AD 43 by the leaders of the Atrebatu tribe. So what we're starting to do is we're starting to find trading coins. More and more coins are starting to be found in the south, particularly Colchester, Camalodunum, and St. Albans Verulamium. And this is a really nice statement to make. So if we go to here, this is a nice statement to make. And we're joined by a few people online, actually. We're joined by Marilyn, Meg, and Black Patches Dog, and a few others. Hello, everybody. So the next thing we want to do is look at Colchester, a map of Colchester. Bill has been to Colchester with me as well. Bill seemed to have witnessed when I've got Bill in a lecture like this, I can turn around and say, Bill, can you remember the time that I was doing a lecture by the city wall in Colchester and people were injecting cocaine behind us?
Yes, I had a snort myself. No, I didn't.
Oh God. Well, they were, and that's. I actually went on TV a few days later on a TV program, and it was like, yeah, it was really weird. So anyway, one of the things that when we go to Colchester, come on, and the Roman stuff everywhere, but if you start looking by looking at the lidar, you can actually see that Colchester is being really developed as an Iron Age site well before AD 43. So think about this statement, folks. After Julius Caesar, what the people saw, Britain isn't resisting Rome. Its rulers are copying Rome to gain legitimacy. So Connoballinus is basically saying, look at me, right? You know, I'm being Roman, right? I'm thinking Roman. I'm trading with the Romans. I've got Roman type coins. I've got Roman type buildings, right? I've got Roman boats, right? I've got Roman traders here, right? We people can settle here. You know, these people are actually starting to become this idea that Rome is. This is not Pax Romana. This is not the Roman peace. This is the Roman ideal. Now, when we think of the story and we think of the ideology, that there is a writer, a classical writer, that confirm Britain is already in Rome's orbit. Now, somebody a few weeks ago, I think, they said, hang on a minute, Carl, right? You're not convinced of some of the writings that the Roman writers are telling us about Britain, but you're convinced that Jesus Christ existed by some writings that were written by other people in the Bible. And I said, well, I can have my belief structure, but I can also say that where there's myths or legends or things being told, there's a fact waiting to be found, right? So with that in line, with that in our minds, let's just think of this. The Roman writer Strabo, writing in AD 20, says of Britain, right? He says this of Britain, right? Let's have a little map of Britain now. Hang on a minute. We'll come back to this now. There we go. That's a nice one. Strabo, the Roman writer, says Britain trades heavily with Rome. Remember this, AD 20. Trades heavily with Rome. Pays customs duties. Hang on a minute. Customs duties. Why are they paying the Romans customs duties? Why? Because it's in Rome's orbit. It's more useful unconquered than conquered, right? And that's a fact. It's lots of military generals have thought this in history, right? If you don't need to conquer a country, if you don't need to invade it, don't do it, right? Napoleon should have thought about that before he invaded Russia, right? It's said that one of the key reasons that Napoleon invaded Russia was because he wanted the grain, right? If he'd have come to a deal with the Russians to get the grain, he would not have needed to invade Russia, right? But he could have said that Russia's within his orbit of the Napoleon alliance in 1812 without invading it. So lots of people have thought in different ways throughout history. So Strabo in his own Latin, but not in our language today, but the translation is, why bother invading when Britain is already profitable? To keep 36,000 soldiers in Britain or 40,000 soldiers in Britain, which, by the way, right, 40,000 soldiers doesn't sound a lot, but 40,000 soldiers is half of the entire British Army strength today. And our British Army is still in about 30 or 40 bases around the planet, right? And so half of the modern army that we've got today, right, in the Roman period was eventually billeted in Britain, right? So that's a lot of soldiers, right? But until we get to AD 43, right, Britain was massively profitable. So why invade Britain and start to make a loss? This is one of the big questions. This is the question which I'll not be able to answer. I might be able to answer it one day, but this is the thing, right? Keeping a Roman military presence in Britain, right, which is very costly to the Roman Empire. Why do you do it? Why do you need to do it for nearly 400 years, right? Why do you need to do it, right? When you can just get away with what they were doing between AD 43, what changed? We don't need to answer that tonight. We might not be able to answer that one. So this is huge. This is a huge thing to be saying. Rome sees Britain as an economic partner, not a hostile frontier. And when we start to think of it like this, it makes things very, very powerful. It really, really does. It makes things very powerful in understanding the actual story. So archaeological clues. What we could put in a nutshell, right? So we sort of get a burial like this, you know, there's 3D image. Archaeological elite burials with Roman luxury goods. There were probably tens of thousands of them in Britain, right? But we've probably found about 100 of them in Britain, you know, dating from 54 BC to AD 43. And what we see is diplomatic exchange of objects. And now the word I hate this word. I always get upset with the word slavery, right? Because sometimes people don't understand what it means, right? So there's a point to this. So Barbary pirates landing on the southwestern coast of Ireland, kidnapping 1,000 people, then forcing them into slavery. That's slavery, right? Traders going from the Caribbean to Africa, buying people to work on plantations, right? That's slavery, right? But what is this slavery, right? Me and Richard are tribal chiefs, and we decide that we're gonna send our eldest son, right, to Rome to learn Roman ways, right, to keep the peace as a temporary hostage for 10 years. Is that slavery? No. And this was common practice, what we would do. And actually, when you think about it, people did the same with the monks. I'm sorry, it's the same thing. In medieval England, and then eventually medieval Wales, people would send their second son, or sometimes their eldest son, to the monastery to keep the monasteries happy, right? So that their eldest son can learn, and maybe, you know, they'll be one of the brethren, right? This thing has happened throughout history. British kings sent sons to Rome. The Romans educated them, Romanized them, and those people would then be loyal to the imperial power. And this was exactly in the mindset of, I've got to put him in there, Adolf Hitler. What the idea was, what we'll do, we'll start taking people from different parts of Europe who are Aryan type, and we'll educate them, send them back, and those countries then could. The eventual plan was to have these countries in Europe independent, but with German minds in them. That's what Adolf Hitler thought, right? He may have got that in Mein Kampf from the Romans, who knows? But there's a danger with that. Right? And you've heard me make this statement many times before. The only thing that can destroy Rome is Rome itself. Again. And what I mean by that is when you look at Varus's legions, towards the end of the reign of the great Emperor Augustus, originally Octavian, right? Good old friend of Julius Caesar back in the day. Now, Augustus became emperor between 28 and 27 BC and died in 14 AD 14, right? So, one of the longest reigns of any Roman emperor, to be honest with you. Some of them didn't last very long at all, right? Nero being one of them, nor did Caligula. But the point is that Arminius, before AD 9, a decade earlier, had been sent by his dad hostage to Augustus, and he was educated. He was sent back, hoping that he would then educate the people of Germania in the ways of what happened was something else. Arminius knew how Romans thought. So that's how he was able to entice 3 entire legions into a forest and wipe them out. And 9 in the reign of Augustus. Camel and Junum, and I do really, really well. We're going to have our questions probably about 10 to 9. So we might have a little break in a moment, right? Because I'm very aware that I might not get through all of this, but Camel and Junum before, and what we've got, Camel and Junum after. Me and Bill have been there on that field looking at the temple. It's sort of, you can see where it's sort of marked out on the grass, and then we did some field walking, which we won't talk about again. Bill, that day, we did the field walking on that very field there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I know what happened there.
Were you?
Shall I shut up?
Yeah, with the with the museum. Yeah, we won't mention that one. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Questions of field walking in this.
I won't mention Michelle.
Yeah. Mention Michelle's Roman coin. Yeah, we won't mention that. We won't mention that.
Okay, we haven't said it.
How embarrassing! Bill, how embarrassing that day. Bill, we're going to go through it, right? We're going to go through it. I'm in the field and I say, oh my God, I found a bit of Roman Samian ware, Colchester Samian ware. And then somebody comes up to me and says, oh, I found some Roman Samian ware. And I'm thinking, oh, brilliant. And Bill finds some hypercaust brick tile. I'm thinking, great. Rosamond comes over and she says, look at this clay object, which eventually turned out to be half of a Roman curling tong, right? All of this was dated and provenance by the National Museum of Wales. And then Michelle runs across the field and says, look what I found, a Roman coin, the bitch.
Yeah.
Showed up by my own woman. Disgusting. I tell you what, Bill, that was amazing, wasn't it? That it was great.
That was a good day. Yeah, good day. Yeah.
That was a good day. That was, yeah. But Chris did complain about going into that car park where there was a little bar you had to go through. Yeah, you knew you scraped the top of the car on that one, but the van on that one. But anyway, so basically the large Oppidum, we're looking at all the stuff you can see on the plan. Basically the Iron Age people laid out a template which was seemingly going to be bigger than the actual template that the Roman city of Colchester would eventually occupy, right? So the Oppidum, the proto-city, the pre-Roman city established by the Iron Age people would have been much bigger than the Roman city, right? And these developing centers, Dropolis in Dorset, the likes of Caliva Atrebatum, the likes of Canterbury were all areas that were being developed before the Romans ever got their military hooks into Britain. We see Colchester being a site where they're minting coins. And, by the way, Bill, the coin comes in. You know that coin that she found?
Yes.
That coin dated from around AD 54. And they were being made in Colchester very early on.
Oh.
The Colchester were making typical Essex people. They were making forgeries of Roman coins within years of Roman era Britain.
Yeah. Why not?
But mind you, Bill, right? Mind you, my dad used to forge coins. He used to have a little mold and used to pour lead into them, and he used to use them in all the slot machines in the pubs in Lantwit Major, right? The pubs in Lantwit Major cottoned on that there was somebody using these lead coins, so they changed all the dispensers. And that was my fault if you weren't able to use the one-armed bandit in some of the pubs in St. Athan and Lantwit Major. It's because of my dad, Goff. Right. So because he blocked them up with these coins. Anyway, moving on. So anyway, minting coins, strong Roman connections ever before, Rome, whatever. So when Claudius invades Britain, officially in AD 43, he doesn't build a capital. He takes over one that already exists, which is basically he only needs to change a few things. And was the temple already there? That's the thing. Was the temple already there? And that's the really interesting thing. Wouldn't it be the greatest tribute to start building a temple to Claudius before he even gets to Colchester, knowing that he's going to be there within weeks? Love it. I'm not saying there's any credence in the temple being built before AD 43, but it's a good idea. It's a good idea. So what we're going to do is I want to do the stuff in the middle. So what we're going to do a throwaway statement now. We're really not touching Claudius at all today, but let's just throw away. Why Claudius does invade Britain in AD 43? Why does he? Right? Why does he? Why? What's the point? Right? What's going on? Well, we'll answer a lot of this after the break. But anyway, not because Britain was wild. But that's what we're told in school. The Romans invaded Britain because it was wild, right? Maybe Claudius and his forces invaded after AD 43 because of their greatest friend, Conoballinus, this great leader of the Cativallanite people, had died, right? Something similar with Boudica and her husband, Prasutagus, but that's a little bit later. There's a power struggle amongst the tribes and amongst Conoballinus' sons after AD 43. Should they remain friends with Rome? That's the point. Should they remain friends with Rome? That's this is the point. And maybe Rome panicked, or is that the case anyway? Or is that not the thing at all? Rome invited in by exiled British elites. So in other words, some of the leaders who had supported Rome had just been kicked away. They've been told, just go away. We don't want you anymore. You're too Roman. You're not British anymore. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe it's a bit like an early Brexit vote, But maybe this is more the case. Claudius needed military prestige. Claudius was a bit of a weak man. We've all seen Richard Graves' I Claudius from the 1970s, but it's a bit of a stutter, a bit of a weak man, right? But by having this military victory, by formally conquering Britain using the military troops, right? Maybe that would have given Claudius some military prestige. Going back to Strabo, right? The Romans did not need to invade Britain to have Britain as part of Rome, right? But a military conquest would seal Claudius as being one of the greats in history, right? Claudius, it said it was political opportunism, and it was not a desperate war because he didn't need to do it. One takeaway sentence before the break, right? Between Julius Caesar in 54 BC and Claudius in AD 43, Britain became Roman in trade, culture, and politics long before it became Roman in law. So it's just one last tick box. Bring it into Rome. So what we'll do exciting stuff about Caligula after the break. And another emperor, well, maybe two emperors that tried to invade Britain before Caligula and the big invasion of AD 43. Whether we'll get to the end of this, I don't know. So we're going to take We're gonna take a we're gonna have a little bit of a chat now, right? And we've got Nylog online who says, lovely stuff, chaps. Yes, Nylog online says hello, and so do all my other people on YouTube. So there we go. So what we're going to do now, we're going to have a break. And Richard, Dickie, can we see you, Dick? We want to see you, Dick. Good. Thank you.
Can you rephrase that?
What is what was going on in your dirty mind? I didn't say anything untowards. Right. Okay, Bill.
From what you're saying, Carl, do we know how many legions that Claudius took over? Because I'm beginning to think we're in a situation where it's not impossible that he could have been invited over to Britannia, knowing there'd be no great opposition.
Well, basically,
certainly not part of the world. Not in the southern part of the country. We know that there was opposition further north, obviously. But I just wonder, is that a contender to think about? Maybe
okay. Okay, well, if we look at it this way, right? We look at it nicely, slightly, right? There wasn't a great deal of opposition initially to not Julius Caesar's, Claudius's legions, as we'll see, right? And you could say that lots of historians do actually agree with what you just said. It's almost as if he was invited in, right? But you could erase that from history and say, we've gone over to Britain, we've conquered these people, right? It's a military conquest. We've had very few casualties, right? And there's something in what I've just said, and there's something in what you've just said, right? When the Boudiccan rebellion takes place, right? Rome loses an entire legion, right? But we see nothing on that scale. And there's basically 3 Roman legions in Britain, right? And it's likely that if the second Augusta Legion had marched to face Boudicca by itself, that would have been wiped out as well, right? So if you're thinking about that, the Britons were capable of defeating the Romans. So, but there's nothing on this scale when the Romans invade in AD 43. The native Britons would have been better armed in AD 43 than they were later, because the Romans would have disarmed lots of them. So the point that you've made, Bill, and what I've said could be very accurate, that there was not the resistance because they had been invited over initially. Fact. Anything else, Bill?
No, thank you, Carl. Yeah. Something to think about.
Yes, yeah. And what about you, Goff?
Well, I can't believe that before both invasions there wasn't some sort of contact. The odd trader going across and blogging a few things and showing them. I just can't believe it was just a one-off. You know, they hadn't been there before in some sort of form. So I think they were prepared, the locals, before both invasions. I think they had contact with the Romans or the Gauls as well. Yeah. Don't know.
This is the way to do it. You are dead right. You know, this is how people have done it throughout history. We sort of soften people for an invasion. We make it easy. Goff, what you've just said is the. I don't know if you're into. Well, you are into a little bit of sci-fi, aren't you? But one of the things that we see about lots of science fiction things, alien invasions of Earth, they always talk about, oh, there's already aliens here. They've already been seeking us out and to try to sort of influence it. That's every single sci-fi invasion of planet Earth. They're already here, right? What you've just said, Goff, is totally the case, right? There is a lot of contact, and there's been contact with Rome from very early on, and we've said that from day one. The Phoenicians, the Carthaginians first. 350 years BC, and then what we've got Roman traders. It's all going on. So you're dead right. Yeah, it's completely correct. What about you, Richard?
I don't know. Can you hear me? You hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you, babe.
Oh,
Yeah,
all right.
that's what's making a strange noise.
I've got a separate microphone. I tried it. So you
Yeah,
can hear.
that is making a strange noise, but we can hear. Could you sing a bit like Elvis? Oh, I wish I was. You could do it with that.
No, I'll let you off that. So,
All right
no,
then.
very
Okay.
interesting. As you say,
So
I think
so
all
what we
these
are going
with these
go on.
invasions that they, as you say, they come over here, begin trading. I expect they see a bit of trade, bit of gold and silver, perhaps copper, trading all this sort of stuff, and then the Romans think, well, we can save a bit of money here. We'll go straight to the source ourselves. Selves, did I say?
It's a very important point. Let's control it all. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it turned out not to be as profitable. One thing that we keep hearing historians talk about. It was very expensive for the Romans to keep 3 active legions in Britain, right? Very expensive, and the gain of keeping the legions here eventually wasn't worth it. But Rome never left, and the legacy's here. But then again, there might be something else in that. So we'll talk about that again. So what it is now, the time now, 8:21. We'll be back at 8:31, and we won't have much left. I just need a bit of a drink. So we'll be back soon, folks.
Okay.
Okay. Oh. You keep me going, sweetheart. You keep me going. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, wait, yeah.
for a minute. Sliced apple. Here in this pan.
Another one. Another one bites the dust. Oh, another one.
I tell you what, if people start talking about bum banditry, I'll have a go.
Bites the dust.
What's that?
Don't go away.
You can have a wee. We're just about to start.
Come on, I'm back.
I thought you said you were having a wee.
Who did? Not me.
You did. You said you were having a wee.
Nope.
Well, if it was me and Richard, we just what?
I was humming to myself. Go on. Meanwhile,
Me and Richard would just say we're having a slash. Right, let's crack on. I'm thinking of becoming
never mind. Why are you in the dark?
I'm not in the bloody dark now. I'm showing you these images.
You look in the dark to
Right,
me.
folks. Oh, Bill, stop
Carry
making
on.
allegations.
Oh, right.
Sometimes you can be a real bitch.
I can't be. Right, let's go. Back to Cam.
I haven't seen you with any really attractive women recently, Bill.
No, I'm still trying, Carl. Still trying. Arden's
Yeah,
gone.
you definitely are trying.
Mm.
Oh, by the way, I got to send you some kind of postcard.
Yes, like the last one.
Right, now, the big question is, did any other emperors try to invade Britain before AD 43, between 54 BC and AD 43? The answer is Caligula, Tiberius, and Augustus all had a crack of invading Britain. Now, I think somebody said last night, I had no idea of that. And to be honest with you, it's something that we're not taught about, right? Caligula did attempt something, but it was very Caligula. Now, I believe that Caligula did invade Britain, but that's for another talk. That's for another discussion. I could be completely wrong, but that's it, right? Yes, Caligula attempted an invasion of Britain around AD 40. Most historians say it never actually happened. However, Augustus, this is Augustus, the man who built the dream of Rome after 28, 27 BC, all the way through to his death in AD 14. Augustus planned invasions, but never crossed. Now, Augustus left there for
Carl, can you hear me? You're gone.
and there's our Tiberius and there's our Augustus, right? What?
You broke up then.
What do you mean I'm gone?
We lost you. We lost you for 20 seconds.
Now! Can you hear me now?
Now we can, yeah.
Shut up!
Carry on.
You're getting as bad as Roger. My God! Right. Anyway, so Augustus did try to invade Britain. He really, really did. Now, Augustus, in becoming the first emperor of Rome, with his masses, he planned an invasion of Britain, but it was cancelled due to revolts within his brand new empire in 27 BC. Another one was planned in 26 BC, but was abandoned. But here's something really, really important. In AD 7, Augustus came to diplomatic settlement with Britain instead. Now, what the hell does that mean? He came to a diplomatic agreement with Britain instead of invading it. Why would he need to do that? He's the all big emperor, right? Now, thinking about all of this, thinking about the masses of legions that would have been needed to have come over here, maybe they wouldn't have been needed at all. Maybe they would have been invited in. The one thing about Conopolinus is that the Romans felt that we've already got a Roman sort of civilization going on in Britain. We don't need to invade, right? At the death of Conopolinus, and as things broke down in AD 43, we said that spurred Claudius to invade. AD 7, we got a little bit of this at the end. AD 7, Britain already traded heavily with Rome. The hostages, the tribute. There was more money being made by not having a military presence in Britain. So just let things carry on. Augustus, the man himself, there he is, wonderful Augustus. Augustus boasts in the Reis Gestae, British kings came to him as supplicants. What we mean by a Rea Gestae is that people came to Rome and said, can we be part of the Roman idea? Can we be part of the Roman dream? Now, folks, right? All right. There are lots of examples where this happened in regards to the British Empire, right? I'll give you two examples. The one example is that the kings of Hawaii, right, decided that they wanted protection from the British Empire. So the British Empire said, okay, they will protect you, right? You can continue going on. You're part of the British Empire, right? But eventually Hawaii was invaded by the Americans and became a state of America. That's one example. Also, India as well. There were all these princes in India, and some of them said, we don't want to deal with the other princes down the road and the kings, right? Can we be part of the British Empire? Slowly but surely, that's how Britain started to take over in India, not just due to the British East India Company, but because people invited the British in. And this is exactly what the Romans are doing across their world, the Rea Gestae. People are inviting them in to protect them, right? So British kings came to him as supplicants. Now, Britain was already politically subdued without conquest. Now, the next guy that we need to talk about on this table here, let's do it, right? On this table here, right? That man there is a man known as Caligula, but this is a younger bust of somebody by the name of Tiberius. Now, Tiberius was the second Roman emperor, right? And he reigned from AD 14 to AD 37. A job lot of 23 years. Now, that was a good length of time for an emperor to be reigning, but Augustus was coming into mature years when he came to be emperor. Tiberius was in mature years when he became emperor. So by the end of his reign, he was very suspicious. He was very cautious. Now, one of the things that we got to think about with Tiberius, this is AD 14. A few years earlier, in AD 9, Augustus lost 3 legions in the Teutoburg forest. 3 legions. Now, across the Roman Empire around that point, there was under 25 legions. So Tiberius expansion. Now, Tiberius wasn't like Augustus, but Augustus preferred that we should have client kings who are friendly with Rome, and therefore you don't need to conquer them. Britain under Tiberius, between AD 14 and AD 37, trade continued for 33 years. Diplomatic control maintained. There was even ambassadors between Britain and Rome. Now, what does that tell you? They were on talking. Everything was fine. No military expedition was ever planned. Now, we're nearly at the end, folks. But we cannot do this without going to see. So we've gone from Tiberius. There we go. He adopted Caligula. And we're going to go to Caligula, who reigned for a very, very short period of time as emperor from AD 37 to AD 41. He was assassinated by Agrippina. Oh, not Agrippina. Oh, yeah, Agrippina, yes. And therefore, Claudius was then left as the emperor. But we're not really interested in him. We're interested in this guy, Caligula. Now, unfortunately, Caligula, and lots of things that have been written about Caligula, say that he was a complete nut job. A bit like a guy in Lantwick Major that me and Jeff Goff knows, called Jim. Total nut job. However, I don't believe he was. I don't believe Caligula was a nut job at all. The question is, did Caligula try to invade Britain? Yes, kind of. And this is the famous episode. Now, Caligula built more than one legionary fortress, more than one harbour, capable of taking an entire fleet. Caligula had built all the infrastructure, the roads, the fortresses, the harbours, the fleet, yes, the military fleet needed to invade Britain. He built it all. Now, does this sound like the actions of a complete nut job? No. Caligula was a great empire builder, and he only reigned for a very short period of time, from AD 37 to AD 41. Now, towards the end of Caligula's rule, as you can tell, was a very short period, in AD 40, historians note the invasion that wasn't. There he is. Ancient sources like Suetonius and Cassius Dio, writing after these events, way after, agreed that Caligula assembled a very large army on the Channel coast. It was ready to invade. Now, I got to be honest with you, let's just think of history, right? Napoleon gathered a huge army to invade Britain. One of the most successful and one of the most important political minds of history, right? But he did not invade Britain. Adolf Hitler gathered an army to invade Britain, but he didn't invade Britain. Whatever you want to say about Adolf Hitler, it's up to you, right? But both of these people who were very successful at one stage, who become unsuccessful by the end of their fighting years, right? Two people that did exactly the same as Caligula. Now, the historians then say that Caligula ordered his troops into battle formation and then commanded them to collect seashells. Not jump into the sea like this, not like this illustration from the days of Julius Caesar, right? He told them to all collect seashells. He declared them spoils of the sea. The following year, however, Caligula was assassinated. And I'm going to try and sketch some evidence together. So when I do a presentation about Caligula, I'm going to try and pitch it as if Caligula did invade Britain. However, the historians say that Caligula claimed that the soldiers collecting seashells were the spoils of the sea. Those shells were supposedly sent back to Rome as victory trophies. How much of this true or not, I do not know, but we are going to tackle this not today, right? But there you go, collecting the seashells. You know, there's Caligula. Collect the seashells, you know? But it's that nuancial. The thing is, Caligula didn't last very long after this event, right? And the important thing is that what's really going on. Was this a mental episode of Caligula? We're told that he had lots of mental health problems, but then again, lots of Roman emperors did. It was a mockery or punishment of the army gathered in northern France. Well, if that's the case, why did he have these massive fortresses built? Why? Why did he use his money and the exchequer's money to build these things and the harbours and the fleet, right? This does not sound the mind of a lunatic, right? A failed invasion plan that collapsed. So just think, the fleet may have actually got to the coast of Britain. One or two troops jumped on the beaches of Pegwell Bay. But like the first invasion of Julius Caesar in 56 BC failed. Is this all propaganda twisted by hostile writers of an event that we don't truly know the facts? The sources are hostile, but something unusual clearly happened in AD 40. Facts. The troops were mobilized, the fortresses built, the harbour built, the fleet was built. Britain was the intended target. The question is, did no crossing take place? Greater men have failed. Well, in fact, I believe that this guy did more than Julius Caesar, did more than anybody else to invade Britain. Now, then we get this. Hang on a minute. What we then get is this event. We get the end of our sort of story today. Now, Claudius didn't invent the idea of the old plan. So the timeline you can put straight to you. 55-54 BC, Julius Caesar raids Britain. 27-26 BC, Augustus plans invasions cancelled. AD 7, weird thing, Britain submits diplomatically to Rome. AD 14 to 37, Tiberius avoids conquest. AD 40, Caligula assembles army, no crossing. AD 43, Claudius invades successfully. Bill, have you ever heard of a reference of Claudius gathering legions on the North French coast? Or could they have already been in Britain? That's another lecture. We're not doing that today. The killer line here today is this. The killer line, right? This is a bit of exaggerated image here, but we'll chuck this in. The killer line. Claudius conquered Britain with an army, but he inherited a conquest plan by Augustus and an almost attempted genius plan by Caligula. Now, what I'm gonna end with is this. That date AD 7, right? Why Augustus made a deal with the Britons in AD 7. Just a little breakdown as we finish. Britain was already doing what Rome wanted. AD 7, Britain traded heavily with Roman Gaul. Fact. Supplied slaves, statues of Lloyd George, metals, hides and grain. They imported luxury goods, which we've shown you, amphora. They imported glass. They imported gems, all sorts of things, amber. The Britons paid customs dues to Rome. They were paying Rome to trade with Rome. Strabo, as we remember, Strabo notes, Britain was profitable without the expense of an army. From Augustus's perspective, between 28-27 BC and 14 AD, why spend money and legions when Britain is already feeding the Roman economy? Augustus voluntarily records himself in Reus Gestae. British kings came to me as supplicants. Basically, they're making a submission to Rome. They're accepting Roman supremacy. They're likely agreements on trade, tribute, hostages, especially royal sons. This turns Britain into a client kingdom network, part of Rome itself. Now, Augustus, if we just take the image of Augustus, as we come to the very end now. AD 9, there are major revolts for Augustus. He thinks, right, huge strain on Roman manpower. The Varus disaster, in AD 9 after AD 7, right? You know, the Rome is not doing well, right? AD 9, before the Varus disaster, Rome does not want any humiliation. It does not want to have a long supply line to physically, military invade Britain in AD 7. So they come to an agreement. Augustus preferred stability, like Julius Caesar. He'd learned from Julius Caesar. Don't invade Britain militarily, right? Augustus preferred predictable borders. Don't need to send the troops over. We're doing well. Augustus preferred client states like the Cativalani with leaders like Conobolinus. Britain was not hostile to Rome in AD 7. They were divided internally, had people that supported Rome. Britain effectively, by AD 7, had effectively absorbed, Britain is effectively absorbed into the Roman world without being annexed. So in other words, by AD 7, Britain is part of the Roman Empire, right? It's part of the Roman Empire in AD 7. More Roman-style coinage, increased imports, elite burials, people believing they're Roman in Britain, across Britain. Kings like Conobolinus using Latin inscriptions, believing they're Roman. They've been Romanized. They've Romanized themselves. AD 7 represents Britain's submission to Rome in practice, even if not in physical military law. And the final statement today, which we look at Augustus, the final word from me. Augustus made a deal with the Britons in AD 7 because Britain was already economically dependent, politically cooperative, and more useful to Rome, unconquered than occupied. So we've got lots to look at next week, but I wanted to give you that. I wanted to give you some facts that you may not have heard. But that's what we've had today. And that is where we will leave it. So, Billis, what would you yeah, go for it.
I didn't realize that there were planned invasions before Claudius. But I just wonder when Claudius actually came. He wouldn't have come with the main invasion force. He would have sent his legions over first to secure the area, stabilize the area, however big that area is. He may have come over the following year or the year after that, even, I guess. But we don't know that, do we? It's not recorded.
Do we know that Claudius came over at all? The point is, I have said some things in here tonight that may be completely inaccurate, right? But about the Caligula thing, that's the only thing I'm saying, you know. Some of the things that I've said about Caligula, nothing else, might not be as sound as the rest of what I've said, right? But I'm going to try and find more. And it seems to me that what you've said, Bill, is completely correct. Britain seems to be a lot more laissez-faire, pacified. It seems to be a walk in the park for the Romans. Why?
Yeah. It's a very grey area, isn't it? It really is.
It's a massive grey area, exactly. Huge grey area.
I think about it. That's all for me, Carl. Thank you.
Right, okay then. Fine. That's fair enough. What about you, Goff?
Yeah, like Bill. Yeah, I hadn't heard of any of that. Very interesting. Yes. Food for thought, isn't it? Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and it's just like it makes us all think. History is not as simple as we're told in school, right? When I was in school, I was told none of that. There was 2 invasions. There was Julius Caesar, nothing in the middle. It was Dark Ages, and then what we've got 43. That's what we were told. So yeah, that's that. Richard, anything you want to say, Dull?
No, very good. Very interesting that they, it took over so many years, different sort of forays onto the mainland, how far they went and everything is, another thing, isn't it? So
it is, and isn't it exciting to think that maybe there was some the military expedition in Britain, tying in with what Goff said. So there may have been some military expedition in Britain before Julius Caesar, but it was not written down. And why not? You know, why not? It's we're not going to find that evidence. It goes back to what I've said, folks. If we had none of the works of Julius Caesar, we'd never have known about his invasion. That's it. Where Caligula, on the other hand, builds all these things on the north coast for a reason. He builds physical evidence. There's more from Caligula than any of them. But Caligula is the one who said he didn't do anything. I'm very suspicious of that fact. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. So we've got lots of exciting things to look at next week. Bill, is there anything else you want to say?
I will, Carl. At the weekend, I'll be in Exeter. I've been to Rougemont Castle with you, so I'll try to find
Yes,
part of the Roman walls, because they are there somewhere, aren't they? Away from the centre.
Yeah.
No?
There is, Bill. What I'm gonna do, Bill. What I'm gonna do. I've done some videos on this online. I will send you the videos about Colchester to you, right?
Not Colchester.
And you will be able to see.
Exeter.
Not Colchester, Exeter. Yeah, I'll send you the videos that I've done of Exeter, right?
Okay.
And you'll be able to see the images of the Roman stuff in Exeter that we didn't see that day. There's one or two things that we didn't see, right?
Okay.
And they're in these videos that I've done. I'll send them over to you.
I appreciate that, Carl, and take some photographs as well and report back. Thank you.
All right, I would love some photographs because this series that I'm doing on a daily repeating, there is one Exeter that I need you to go to that to take photographs that I can do a video. So a bit for you and a bit for me, Bill, if we may.
Send me the details. Thanks, Carl.
So
that's it from me.
I will. If there's anything else thank you very much. Anything from anybody else? No?
Good night.
Okay, I really appreciate you guys tonight. So good night, Richard, Goff, and Bill, and I will be in touch next week. See you next Wednesday, 7:10. Night, folks. Night, boys. Bye, boys. Bye, lovelies. Bye, boys. Bye, boys. Bye, boys. Boys. Right, guys. I don't know any of you on YouTube. I'm all alone on YouTube now. So, guys, don't forget. I'm on next week again on Tuesday and Wednesday at 7:10. We've had more people watching on YouTube than usual. And anyone who wants to make a donation, you can press the pound sign in the bottom there. That's called a super thing. You can press that in the bottom. Subscribe, like, join my channel. But what I'm going to do is when you look at my channel, press the notification bell and you get this Roman thing more or less every day about a different set of Roman stone remains in Britain. I'm not doing earthen things, there's loads of them, but Britain stone remains. And also one thing I'd like to ask you guys, would you all like me to do a live just for you guys on YouTube? Just me talking to you like this on YouTube, right? You could talk about anything if it's to do with acting or archaeology, Roman stuff, but I can't do politics now. I've been told off for doing politics quite sternly. Right. Anyway, if nobody else wants to say anything else, then I do believe that I'm going to put this on here, which I'm used for a while. It's called Buy Me a Coffee. Is it Buy Me a Coffee? Is it Cup of Coffee? Buy Me a Coffee. And it's called .com. I'm still on there. I think that's right. And you can make a donation there. Anyone interested? There you go. Buy Me a Coffee. There you go. Anyway, guys, I'm going to go now. I've got to love my ass. And I've got to get McDonald's. I haven't eaten much all day. So, anyway, thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr i chi. Comment, whatever, and I'm off. So, that's it. Oh my God, I still had one of my people there. So I can look at my chat box before I go. I'm still waiting for anybody to join us. to say anything else? So nothing in the chat box. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Dun, 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 dun.